Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the webinar series, Together We Rise, Post-COVID-19 Way Forward initiative by Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Quality and Productivity, popularly known as SLAAQP. I'm Sakunthala Dureratnam, Vice President of SLAAQP, Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Quality and Productivity. It's a premier organization nurturing world-class excellence in quality and productivity in Sri Lanka. This organization, formed and run by professionals on a voluntary basis, is a non-profit organization which works towards building competencies and promoting practice of quality and productivity concepts and techniques through inculcating quality and productivity culture in our society, with the aim of basing the post-COVID-19 resurrection on the firm, tried and tested foundation of quality and productivity. SLAAQP launches the webinar series Together We Rise, Post-COVID-19 Way Forward. The first webinar in the series is titled Improved Competitiveness Through Increased Quality and Productivity. The resource person for today is Mr. Sunil G. Wijayasinghe, who is a well-known personality in the sphere of quality and productivity in our country. It's my privilege to introduce Mr. Wijayasinghe, Chairman United Motors Sri Lanka, Chairman Watavala Plantation Sri Lanka, Chairman RIL Property, Founder Past President of Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Quality and Productivity, Past President National Chamber of Commerce of Sri Lanka, Past President Employers Federation of Sri Lanka, Past President and Trustee of Justica. Mr. Wijayasinghe, it's our privilege to have you with us to open this series in its first webinar. Over to you, Mr. Wijayasinghe.
Thank you. We are going to talk about improve competitiveness through quality and productivity. And you may be wondering why we are discussing this subject at this time. It is because we are now trying to rise from this crisis that we have had, and we need to rise up without giving up. And I will take some examples from some other countries like Japan, how they rose up after World War II, when their factories were destroyed and they had nothing really to go by. But they didn't lose heart. They were also under the occupation forces of General MacArthur, but they rose up. Gradually they rose up. But to do that, they did a lot of changes. It was a new country. They had a new philosophy. One thing was that they didn't even have to eat properly. They didn't have natural resources, but they focused on, first of all, on producing whatever they could produce. And that is how we all know they got the bad image, or that Japan was very good for cheap and low quality produce. You would know that many of us, when we were children and we had toys that were made in Japan, they would just break within the day, and our parents would say that's okay, it was some cheap Japanese toy. But gradually this image changed, and Japan was synonymous with quality. How did they do this? One thing was they put in a lot of effort into systems to improve the quality of their product. They finally delivered something that nobody expected. It was far better than the products that were produced in most other countries. Ultimately, after a few years, the manufacturers in the other countries were screaming for protection against Japanese goods, because Japanese goods were being bought by the consumers, no sales for their products, and they were finding it very difficult to survive. So how did they do this? That's a fascinating story, but I'm not going into all the details, but some of the things that they did was quality and productivity. Now we also need to look at how competitive we are in a sense of competitiveness. And there are so many definitions of competitiveness. And also there is a competitiveness index which measures overall competitiveness of a country, which measures certain main factors and certain sub factors to show the relationship between these, and how and where we are weak, a country is weak, so that they can address those things and improve competitiveness. While there are so many definitions, one definition that I particularly like is what I have put on the screen, which is degree to which a country can, under free and fair market conditions, produce goods and services which meet the test of international markets, while simultaneously maintaining and expanding the real incomes of its people. So there are key words and key phrases in this. One is under free and fair market conditions. So that is, otherwise you can be competitive with subsidies and all those other special privileges. And also you can be competitive by suppressing the real wages and exploiting labor. So it's not at all like that. Because if your competitiveness and if your economy is growing because of competitiveness, your real incomes will go up. There will be prosperity all around. So that's the sort of competitiveness we are talking about, and we will discuss later on what we should do. If you take examples from Japan, I have been to Japan many times, and you can see that Japan, first of all, focused on the machinery. They said whatever happens, because most of the machines were destroyed during the war, whatever happens, don't let the machines deteriorate, don't let the machines break down. And from that evolved a care for machines and maintenance, finally developing into total productive maintenance, which looks after the machines, and Japan has one of the lowest breakdown rates in the world. Then they also have mechanisms like quality circles, Kaizen, where they use the brains of the worker. It's not only the senior executives who are allowed to use the brains, but also every worker contributes. Because in Masaki Imai's book on Japan's secret of its competitive success, he says it is the Kaizen and the collection of Kaizens given by everybody. So these are some of the initial remarks I wanted to make, and some ideas for us to rise up from this problem. I hope that clears the initial points, Sakuntala. Can I then go into quality and productivity? Because quality and productivity are applicable in every sector, whether it's manufacturing or service, because most people think that quality and productivity are concepts that are applicable only in manufacturing, in factories. Actually, it's applicable in service industries, in banks, in schools, in airlines, in travel agents, everywhere. In every place where work is done, even in your kitchen, even in your home, productivity concepts and techniques and quality ideas are equally relevant. So if we move forward to define what quality is, and right at the outset, I must say that I'm targeting this presentation to the layman, because it is not to the experts on quality, because in a 40-minute presentations, I can't go into too many details. This is just to whet your appetite on what quality and productivity is. So if you take quality is defined in different ways, and there are so many different definitions of quality. One, for example, one is fitness for intended use. So quality as fitness for intended use. Another definition is totality of features and characteristics, etc., etc., where you focus on the different characteristics of a product. And the easiest thing to understand is the third one I have put here, while there are so many others, where your products don't come back or they are not returned, but customers come back for more of your products. That is the level of quality. Now, if you look at the features of a product, different features are there, and for different purposes for different customers. Now, for example, I will take from an industry I'm used to in one of my previous industries. If you take a piece of porcelain, how would you look at the quality of this? What are the features? What are the characteristics? One is you want this to be of a nice surface. You want it to be of a very high whiteness. You want it to be chip resistant, so that even if it knocks against your tap, it doesn't chip. You want it to be scratch resistant, so that you need a hard glaze, hard surface glaze here. You want it to be strong enough so that you can't just break it, even if you just throw it on the table, it doesn't break. And those are some of the definitions. But the features can vary, because if you are exporting this to for a Western country which uses cutlery, then it has to be very hard glaze, because the cutlery marks don't stay there. So that is for a different. If it is for Sri Lankan market only, we eat with our fingers, and this is obviously not going to be scraped. Similarly, if you take even a mug, you have actually two parts of value. This has utility value, because it will hold a cup of tea or coffee or water, whatever it is. That is the utility value of this. But it also has the esteem value. That is why you put a nice decoration and so on. But this particular mug is an expensive mug. It is a very high quality mug. But if you want to do a mug, if you want a mug for, say, a souvenir, to celebrate your 50th anniversary of your company or something like that, then you don't need such an expensive mug, because even if it is not really chip resistant, it doesn't matter. So that's the way you look at products for different purposes and so on. Same way with services. You look at a bank, and you can see that a busy executive wants to go to a bank and go to the teller and get something transaction. Speed is of essence. They want to go fast, get the transaction done, and come off. So you have to cater to that. But a retired person doesn't want speed. He wants to spend as much as possible in the bank. He wants to have a chit chat with the bank teller. So then it's a different kind of service you have to give. So this is how you look at the definitions and what the quality of a product is. I'm going to look at some of the terms, so that for laymen especially, you get familiar with these terms. Quality and reliability. It's two different things, but also most people take quality to include reliability also. But if you look at the two as separate things, you will find that quality is, for example, take a camera. You have the quality of the picture that you take. That is one of the quality characteristics. But it can be very good, but supposing after some time it doesn't work. 3 months later it doesn't work, then it has very low reliability. So that's the difference between quality and reliability, although today when we talk about quality, we mean everything together. Then if you take the way the quality has changed over the years. Earlier, everyone was quite happy. If you take what is called the fundamental quality, or what is normally accepted as a quality standard, you take the SLS mark. If you have the SLS mark, okay, you say our product is of good quality because it has the SLS mark, which tests whether that product has certain characteristics. Now, The problem is that if you are in a competitive industry, so many of your competitors are having the same standard quality. So how do you do something better than your competitors? That is why you have to go to the next level, which is what called competitive quality. So you give some level of quality or service which is a little better than what your competitors are doing. That's how you are able to get a better market share. I have gone through this because even in when I was working at Dankotua Porcelain, I remember we were doing a very difficult product for Macy's, and we were not making money out of that because if you look at any textbook those days on quality, they will say pitch your quality level at the level where there is the greatest difference between your cost curve, because cost will increase as you improve your quality, and your price curve, because people are willing to pay a higher and higher price, but after some time they are not really willing to pay a much bigger price than what they are paying. It will be very, very small, the increase. So between the two, where is the highest? Pitch your quality level there. But the Japanese said, no, we should pitch it a little bit to the right. We will make less profit, but we will get more market share, and the future is better for us. And actually we did that, although initially under my protest, because I didn't know how it will turn out, but ultimately we became masters at this. And even the cost curve came down because we started mastering the art of doing that, and we made good profits later on, and even made into another countries to see whether they can get the same thing done at a cheaper price. They couldn't, and then they came back to us. So that is competitive quality. And finally, we have what is called creative quality. That is where the quality is such that it's a wow factor. People, customers will say, fantastic product. I really love this. I'm surprised. I never expected such a good quality product. Even in a service, you can do that. Actually, in a service sector, it is much easier to do. Now, for example, when I was at the Employees Trust Fund, ETF, as you know, ETF and EPF are two different institutions. Employees Provident Fund and Employees Trust Fund. Employees Provident Fund is managed by the Labor Department, and the ETF, Employees Trust Fund, is managed by the ETF board. But most people don't understand the difference, and we used to get a large number of letters saying, please send us an EPF application form, a claim form. And what do we think our officers do? They send a very nice letter. Dear sir, you have addressed the wrong institution. We are not Employees Provident Fund. We don't have Employees Provident Fund forms with us. We are the Employees Trust Fund. If you want the EPF form, please contact the Labor Department. I said, no, if you are going to delight the customers, if you are going to, for the wow factor, let's do it this way. You get a stock of EPF forms and keep with you, and whenever somebody mistakenly asks us really for an EPF form, we still write that polite part saying we are different, we are not the EPF and all that. But for your convenience, we have obtained the EPF application form, and here it is enclosed. What do you think the person will feel when he gets that sort of a letter? Unbelievable. Would he expect that sort of a service or response from a government institution? Very unlikely. So we have delighted that person. We have wowed him. So that's how you create that. Now, for example, even in India, they say, earlier, everyone accepted the quality of an ambassador car because it was really bad. And you buy a new ambassador after being in the waiting list for many years. You finally get your chance, you go and buy it, you drive it home, and every part of this car is rattling, making a noise. And the story was told, it is a joke, of course, it's an exaggerated one, by a quality expert from India. He said every part makes a noise except one part, that is the horn. You press the horn, no noise. So, but that was accepted But then Maruti Suzuki came into India, superb quality, and then they no longer accepted the ambassador quality. They said, no, we want this soundless, we want it perfect, and so on. So there was a quality revolution that was created by the Maruti Suzuki. So this is what we call creative quality. And yeah, then I will also want to give you some idea about defects and the costs of defects. As you know, defects are very costly. Defects are costly for the manufacturer, is costly for the customer also. Because when I was long time ago in the Ceramics Corporation, we were manufacturing a lot of sanitary ware and wash basins and bathroom ware like that. And occasionally we get a complaint saying that the wash basin has cracked or the cistern has cracked and so on. And then we send someone to investigate and replace, right? But only very few complaints like that we would get. And my subordinates, when I tell them, you know, this is not good, we should do something about it, they say, no, but look at it this way. Only less than 10% are defective. I said, no, it's not 10% defective. It is, the fact is that there are much more defective, but only these few people are complaining. Because what would a normal person think? He buys a Ceramics Corporation wash basin and installs it, and then it cracks after 6 months. And does he complain? Usually he will not complain. He will say, why did I buy this local rubbish? I should have gone straight away for an imported wash basin. Now see, I have to replace this. I have to get a plumber. I have to spend on the piping, put new taps. My wall tiles are damaged. It's such a nuisance. So for the supplier, also it's costly, manufacturer, and also for the consumer it's costly. So in Sri Lanka, we still manufacture. If you ask lots of factories, they will talk about percentage defects. Now, percentage defects is no longer accepted in most places like Japan or Germany and so on. They measure defects in parts per million. And once I was at a training program in Japan, and they said they got a manufacturer of photocopy machines. They got an order from an African country, and they said 5% defects are accepted. And the Japanese company couldn't understand what they meant, because they don't measure their defects in percentage. So they said, well, here's, and they shipped it out. Of course, this is a joke told by them, but it was something similar like that has happened. They shipped out 95% good products and 5% defective products deliberately. And they said, sent an accompanying letter. We really couldn't understand what you meant in this, but anyway, as per your specifications, here's 95% good products and 5% bad products. So because they couldn't understand it. Then lots of people will talk about Six Sigma. So I just want to tell you, Six Sigma is a very high level of quality, which means actually 3.4 parts per a million parts of failures. So only defects is 3.4 parts out of 1 million parts manufactured. It's very high level of quality. But you don't need that very high level of quality for everything. But you need it for important things, like when you go in your car, and do you want anything less than that in your airbag? You don't want anything less than that in your airbag, because it has to be of a very high level of quality. When you get into an aircraft, would you tolerate if the aircraft company says we have our aircraft engines are such that only 5% defective? Because then 5% of the time the planes will crash. But for your baggage handling, it doesn't matter. It's not such a critical thing. You don't need Six Sigma level quality for your baggage handling. but for the engine and things like that, you need a very high level of quality. So today we find that also companies are changing, and the world is changing from looking at the product quality or the service quality to what is known as the enterprise quality. Enterprise quality. So that if the enterprise is a quality enterprise, that means from the time you interact with them, the product is good, their service is good, their people are of good, and their systems are good, even the letters they write are good, the vehicles that they transport are good, and it's very reliable, then it is a high quality enterprise. And if you are dealing with a high quality enterprise, you don't have to look closely at the products and check, because you will accept, you will know that there you get nothing less than good quality. So it's a level of assurance that you have. So we have also the concept of moment of truth. That's also related to quality. Moment of truth is a concept that Jan Carlson introduced to this world when he took over as the CEO of Scandinavian Airways. He said, we can shout from the top of our roofs that our planes are good, reliable, everything, but that's not how people judge. They will judge the quality and the reliability from the way, from the first points of interaction with the company. And what is the first point of interaction? That is when they have more faith in the company. When you board the plane, if you are received properly, you have faith. When you go and take your seat and the seat is very clean, then you think, well, if they maintain the seats clean, then probably they are maintaining everything clean. Whereas if you have still some coffee stains or something on your tray table and not clean properly, then you start beginning to have doubt, how do they maintain the engines? So moment of truth is very important. And even in Sri Lanka, we always say, sometimes the security guard plays an important role. If he doesn't treat the incoming visitor well, you have lost that moment of truth. Then you go to the reception and the reception is busy talking to somebody else and not recognizing that you are in her presence, then you form a bad opinion of the company. If a lorry of that company with their branding and everything is being driven recklessly on the road, then you form a bad impression of the company. So there are so many things where you can improve your moments of truth. So we also hear about the concept called TQM, or Total Quality Management. Now, this is something that the Japanese started with a concept called company-wide quality control. They said it's not only the product, but the order taking, the marketing, the production, the maintenance, the after-sales service, the invoicing, the account keeping, everything must be of good quality. And you must have very good systems. So in TQM, there are so many features in that. I'm just rushing through with a brief introduction. High focus on the product, of course, but high focus on the customer also. And a high focus on the people whom you have employed to do this, so that they are engaged, they are totally committed to this company, and so on, and all the systems and procedures. So finally, I would like to say that promoting quality is up to you. This is what I learned from a foreign consultant. He said, you demand quality from all your subordinates, and then you will get quality. And then the quality of the whole organization will go up. So that's how you have to look at quality. Now, quality is therefore how I wanted to say is not a very complicated concept, but there are simple ways of looking at things, and there are very simple things that you can implement, like delighting your customers and so on, which will help you to get a better response from your customers. So then I will look at productivity. Now, productivity is also a very often misunderstood word. Lots of people think that productivity means, higher productivity means you have to work hard, that you have to sweat more, you have to work longer hours, and so on. That was the case more than 100 years ago. But modern productivity, driven by modern techniques of productivity, lots of management techniques on productivity will make sure that you get more with less effort. You get more by working less fatigue, less time, and so on. And it is productivity that has helped us, even people who are not very wealthy, to be able to afford things. Earlier, how many could afford a motor vehicle? Only the really wealthy could afford. But with the concept of improved productivity, example, the technique that was promoted by Eli Whitney, who was the inventor of the cotton gin. And he's the one who came up with this idea in the US, because the US government at that time, fighting the civil war, had this issue because they can't get enough guns for the war. And Eli Whitney said, I will produce guns for you, so much of guns in this period and at a cheaper cost. What he did was, earlier, every gun was made by a blacksmith, one by one. But Eli Whitney came up with this idea and made interchangeable parts, so that you make the different parts of the gun and you have an assembly operation. Whereas the blacksmith method was not that, because when a blacksmith makes a one gun is slightly longer than the other, they are crafted. But this manufacturing system made the guns cheaper and made much faster. So the wrong notions of productivity have to be corrected in the minds of people, because productivity actually benefits. One other major wrong notion is productivity improvement means that people lose their jobs because less people are involved. Actually, if you look around, if you take Japan, where productivity is high, there is no unemployment. In Singapore, productivity is high, and people are coming across the Malacca Straits every day for work, because Singapore doesn't have enough labor. So actually, there is more employment, because if productivity is high, your goods are more affordable, and therefore your employment will be more. Because let's look at this low productivity trap. If your productivity is low in your organization, the price of your products are high, which leads to sluggish sales, whether it's domestic or export, which means then, because your sales are low, lower utilization of plant capacity, and then you have low or no profits, and therefore low wages. With low wages comes low worker morale, and you have no capital to invest in modern technology, which will lead to lower productive once again. So it's not only a cycle, but it is a declining spiral. It declines, goes down and down until you are bankrupt. So you have to break this and improve your productivity and get your sales at a higher level. Now, if you go to technical way of looking at productivity is a ratio. And the ratio is such that it's usually, if you look at, okay, I'll go to the next slide. it is output divided by input, because productivity is not production. It is different. It is always a ratio. So you have ratios like number of units produced per man hour, or number of liters produced per man hour, or number of customers served in a restaurant per square foot area of that restaurant, and so on. Or even in your own vehicle, the ratio of kilometers run per liter of fuel. That is a ratio of measuring how good you are. So this is how you do the measurements. And if you want to improve yourself, you have to measure productivity and have all these measures. Otherwise, to start with, you don't know where you are. And the next thing to do is to prioritize your productivity improvement effort, because very often people are confused. Even as a consultant, I have been contacted by some people and say, we want to improve productivity, we want to have a productivity improvement program, and particularly labor productivity. We want to improve our labor productivity. And I asked them, why do you want to improve labor productivity of all, amongst other things? They said, no, I mean, productivity improvement means labor productivity. I said, okay, let me have a look at your cost structure. And I look at it. This is a Pareto chart. Pareto chart means according to the reducing magnitude of the cost. Sometimes it's material cost that is so high. And then comes energy, then comes labor, and so on. So what should you tackle first? Your material costs. So your productivity is the area that you have to look at. So if it is energy, focus first on your energy. I'm not saying neglect the other things, but focus on the energy, and then focus. And if it is obviously labor, then you focus on labor. Then there are actually productivity improvement techniques originated in the US, but the Japanese took them and made it into sort of user-friendly things. And what we learned about productivity, we first learned the original US methods of analysis and so on, but the Japanese people have made it very simple. The Toyota company produced this concept of the 7 ways. And if you can eliminate or reduce these 7 ways, your productivity will improve. And the 7 ways, it's easy to remember with this acronym called TIMBOOT. T stands for the transport waste. That is, if you look at some factories, you will see a lot of transport going on. Raw materials are being transported here, there, and everywhere. And so all that is waste. And now you see that we have been transporting ourselves to a lot of meetings and so on. Now we are doing this on Zoom, and we are getting a huge saving. Same thing with inventory. High inventory is a waste. People don't understand. Sometimes only accountants understand, because they know that that is financed by bank loans or bank overdrafts. But you're actually spending something idling. It is not costing nothing. It costs your bank interest. Then your waste of motion. Motion. Even in your workplace, if you have the unwanted motions without having a proper arrangement of things around you, it is a waste. So I have seen in factories sometimes where the people have to reach for something on one side, reach for another thing on one side, turn back and keep something, and so on. So all that is wasted motion. And W stands for waiting time, where you have to wait until the machine finishes something, or you wait for your boss, or wait for some instruction, wait till somebody else processes something else. All that is waste. And then O stands for overproduction, where overproduction means you're producing something much more. Like, for example, I found in one case, printer. He has to produce something for export, and he thinks, okay, we may have some quality issues, so we produce more. We produce 25% more, and then we are sure we can export. But that 25% sometimes is a waste. So then over processing, sometimes it's something has been designed that you have to do a lot of processing. That's also waste, and obviously defects are waste. So these are the waste that you can look around in your factory, in your office, and try to correct. Improving labor productivity, also a few other important issues. Working environment. People don't realize that if it is a dimly lit environment, productivity suffers. Experiments have shown that if the lighting is not good enough, productivity is low. If the ventilation is not good enough, productivity is low. If there is a noisy environment, productivity is low. So look at this working environment, including safety aspects. Tools, jigs, and fixtures. Have the appropriate tools. Now, if you look at the Sri Lankan broom and a Japanese broom, Sri Lankan broom is this much, and a Japanese broom is this much. And so when a Japanese person sweeps the floor, he covers twice the area that a Sri Lankan covers. So workplace layout, the factory layout, should be looked at scientifically to see that the work happens in a productive manner. Workstation layout, even the heights of the tables according to the type of processing that you do. So a lot of scientific things. I'm just betting your appetite here only, because this alone will take hours to explain. Then process improvement, obviously, to improve the processes. Sometimes there are techniques even in an office, in a office environment, called organization and methods to reduce your paperwork. Very often you have to do a lot of unnecessary paperwork. We have to rationalize all that. And finally, nutrition. Nutrition, it has been proved that, especially in studies in India, that even giving a biscuit during the morning tea break can make a big difference. And they have found that accidents have reduced, productivity has increased, fatigue has reduced by just giving something. So that's why even at, I remember the Ankuto Porcelain, we had this habit of giving a snack in the morning, morning tea break, and a snack in the evening tea break. And all the time the unions would come and say, please don't give this, but at the cost to our salaries. And I have consistently refused, because I think it's very important for them to get the proper nutrition at that point. And not only a biscuit or snacks or something like that, but also vitamins. At one stage, we did a study with nutritionists, and they came up with this idea that if you give certain things like multivitamins, vitamin C and D, and a whole lot of things, that their frequency of falling ill will reduce. And that actually was proved. But unfortunately, some of the Sri Lankan workers had this funny notion that they need to get a cold once a month, so that all the muck inside their brains get flushed out. But many others reported that this is good. Now, so this is what I was saying. There are scientific ways of looking at the workstation layout and so on. And I hope, therefore, that this gave you a brief insight into certain basic ideas of quality and productivity. And I think you have some food for thought and some techniques that you can implement immediately. So if there are any questions, I'm ready to answer it at this stage.
Vijay Singha, that was a wonderful briefing. You made so simple such complicated techniques and the concepts. Quality and productivity, you explained so that even laymen could understand in a manner filled with your working experience. Thank you so much. This is very helpful to us, especially in the current situation where competitiveness is very, very important, and all companies are full of extra capacity, hoping to catch potential customers and to supply the reduced demand. So in this context, your thought sharing has been much appreciated. Let's look at questions. Let us see whether there are any questions. Can the participants forward any questions if you have, please? Mr. Vijayasinghe will be very willing to answer these. Let's make use of the most important and valuable experience.
I think I can see in the question somebody asking to give a brief in Kaizen, please.
Yes.
Shakuntala, do I have permission to give a very...
Yes, Mr. Vijayasinghe, that's one of your expert areas. We would like to have a brief explanation on Kaizen and how it can help in the present context.
Yeah, I think if I were to explain Kaizen very briefly, actually it is a very simple technique. But maybe I need to go a little into the background. If you look at Japan, because this originated in Japan. In Japan, after World War II and the American forces led by General MacArthur was in command, they tried to introduce a lot of Japanese, like American management systems, which really did not find favor in Japan. The American systems were geared actually to a huge migrant labor force in America, where in a typical American factory, side of you and a Brazilian on another side of you and a Canadian next and so on. And they said productivity was very high because none of them knew English. And therefore they couldn't have a chit chat with their colleagues. So instead of unable to have a conversation with your neighbors, you kept on working. But because of their lack of knowledge of language and so on, they had to be given a very comprehensive training on exactly what they should do. There were manuals of procedure and all that. And they are not allowed to move out of this standard procedure. Now in America, in Japan, it was not the case because the literacy was high in Japan. People, it was one language, and they had got used to always giving some ideas and participating in things. And they had a joke, therefore, that according to the American system, you have to not only keep your lunchbox in your locker and come into the factory, but you have to keep your brains also in the locker and come into the factory because you're not allowed to use the brains. So, so in that environment, there were people who came out, studied this and came up with this suggestion. Kaizen means actually small improvements for the better. And they focus on tiny little improvements all the time. And in some Japanese factories, people give hundreds of improvements a month. And all these little ideas get collected and it is improved. So they are empowered to even discuss with their boss and may say, I have this idea, can I experiment with it? And they are allowed to do it. And this is encouraged. So a large number of those little ideas. To give you an example of how they think. But because basically for Kaizen, you have to realize one thing. That is problem consciousness. And many Japanese experts who come here say, Sri Lankans don't have that problem consciousness. That's one problem, because I'm surfacing this because we have to change this. Because he says he came to help a factory, and the factory manager was asked, okay, I'm told that you have a huge problem because your defects are high. He said, no problem. Then he said, but I heard that you have 20% rejects. And the factory manager says, yes, 20% rejects, but no problem. So if you think that all these things are no problem, then you won't do anything. Whereas the Japanese people are taught that even if they trip on a wire on the floor, that's a problem. Why did I trip? This should never happen again. What can I do to prevent this happening again? So this problem consciousness has to be trained in our people, and people have to be given this authority to do to make these little changes. Another problem we have is that our bosses sometimes don't like people changing. I had this experience long before I knew Kaizen. When I was at State Engineering Corporation in my first job, a worker was a very intelligent chap. He did something, made a small change, and I really appreciated him because I was an inexperienced trainee at that time. But when my boss came, he went up to the boss also, because I had encouraged him so much. He got more excited and told the boss, Sir, not the way you told, but I made a change and did this. What do you think happened? He was given a good shelling. He was told, you do as I tell you, not the way you want. So I don't think he ever did a Kaizen in his life after that.
Can I join two questions together? People are asking to elaborate on how productivity can be improved in the service sector, especially in the state sector.
Yeah, I think state sector, the only experience I can think of is my experience in at ETF, and of course before that I have been in government manufacturing operator SOEs. But if you look for opportunities, there are plenty of opportunities. And if you use some of the Japanese techniques like quality circles and so on, the people themselves will come up with a lot of things. I'll just give you another example. We had a quality circle scheme at ETF board, and I don't know all the details. So once the quality circle came and made a presentation to me and said, 60% of the claim forms that are received are sent back to the claimant because one question they don't fill. And the question was, in the Sinhala form, it said, Kalatrayage Nama, right? Even I didn't know the meaning of Kalatraya at that time. It means spouse, the name of spouse. But it was a very good, it was designed by an expert in Sinhalese. It's a good word. But unfortunately, you send this form to the estate sector and they don't know what the meaning of this is. So what do? We send another letter and saying, please fill number 6 and send it back, and he still doesn't know what Kalatraya is. So our people redid the form with explanatory notes and so on, and then the rejected claims came down from 60% to 10%, and that was a huge boost to the productivity of that section. So there are so many areas where you can improve by using organizational methods, form design. There are lots of productivity techniques that can be done. But rather than experts or industrial engineers doing it, I think if you set up quality circles in all these government institutions, a lot of improvement can be made.
Thank you, Mr. Vijayasinghe. There's a question. With your banking experience, can you please share some examples of how to wow clients?
Yeah, I think one of the things we did even at Merchant Bank was that usually when a customer, if you say lease customer, and he has not paid, defaulted for some time, And then he doesn't even cite the place. What do? We take that registration book and put it in some record room and so on. And 2 years later, he comes back and said, because he has sold some land or something, here's the money. I want to pay all my arrears. Please take this money and give me my registration book. And now we have no idea where the registration book is, because we have put it locked up somewhere, because it is not an active book. And then we tell him, thank you very much for the money. We'll take the money, but can you come in 1 week so that we can search for this and keep. But then we implemented 5S. And after implementing 5S, within a few seconds, we can find this. Because storage, there are techniques for improving storage. So customers are surprised, because even more than in other places, here we say just sit until we write the receipt, and we give the registration book, and the matter is settled. So I think that alone, and customer waiting time was vastly reduced. And so these are some of the things in the banking sector which just come to my mind at the moment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vijay. I think you have aptly answered that question. Others were also asking you to touch on service industry, so this answer covered that as well. I would like to conclude this webinar by extending my sincere thanks to Mr. Vijay Singh on behalf of the Council of the SLAAQP for being the resource person in this seminar and for sharing your knowledge and experience in the field of quality and productivity. There's much more that you have to tell us, but time is limiting. Thank you, Mr. Vijay Singh, for sparing your valuable time and sharing your valued experience. Thank you for the large number of participants who have registered for this webinar. Stay tuned for the upcoming webinars. Next Saturday's session will be on the use of 5S to lay foundation to enhance productivity by Mr. Mahinda Saranapala, followed by 5S for the Mind by Professor Ajanta on 13th June, and creative and innovative mindset for the workplace success by Professor Ajit D. Alvis on the 27th of June. We have noted requests for other topics such as lean and service quality. Of course, we have taken note of this, and we hope that we will be able to arrange seminars. Share with us, stay with us, send us your requests. We will try to do our best. Once again, Mr. Vijay Singh, thank you very much. This was a very valid and value-adding advices given to people during this most critical time where we have to be competitive and to use the tried and tested technique of quality and productivity. You made it so simple. Everybody thinks these productivities and TQMs and all are such hi-fi things. You told it in layman's language so that anybody can understand and apply. Thank you, Mr. Vijay Singh. Thanks on behalf of
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I hope it was useful. Thank you and good night.